Amte 2341X midterm reporting. Preparing the engine for removal. Lesson 8. Before starting to work on the aircraft or reciprocating engine, always be sure that the magneto switch is in the off position. Aircraft engines can be started accidentally by turning the propeller if the magneto switch is on. Because this can be automatically be on because the magneto produces electricity. After ensuring that all fuel to the engine is shut off, disconnect the battery to eliminate the possibility of hot wire starting a fire. If it is anticipated that the aircraft will be out of service for more than 6 days, the battery usage will be removed and taken to the battery shop and placed on charge. In these sentences, this shows us that there are also cause of fire for we can read it here. We need to disconnect the battery, because if we don't disconnect the battery, there will be a short circuit and it may cause fire. So what we are gonna do is to return the battery, and it should be replaced. If we need to replace the battery also to prevent any damages on the aircraft, few other preparations should be made before starting to work on the engine removal. Here are the notes. Make sure that there are enough fire extinguisher near at hand to meet any possible emergency. Check the seals on these extinguishers to be sure the extinguishers have not been discharged. On these sentences, this shows us that in any case of fire or any accidental fire, we need a, let's say, a fire extinguisher, because if there are flame that is quickly to burn, we have a fire extinguisher to extinguish the fire. And we are also we should also check if the fire extinguisher has still if we should also check if the seals are not broken, because if the seals are broken, it might not work, or there will be it would not help extinguish those fires. Second is check the wheel chocks if they are not in place. The aircraft can and possibly will inch forward or back during some crucial operations. This shows us that we should always check the wheel chocks, because if we don't check it, the wheel of the aircraft would move. In other words, if the aircraft has a tricycle landing gear, be sure that the tail is supported so that the aircraft cannot tip back when the weight of the engine is removed from the forward end. It is not necessary to support the tail on some multi-engine aircraft if only one engine is to be removed. In addition, the landing gear shock thrust can be deflated to prevent them from extending as the engine weight is removed from the aircraft. After taking these necessary precautions, begin removing the cowling from around the engine. As it is removed, clean it and check for the cracks so that the necessary repairs can be made while the engine change is in progress. On the number 3, this shows us that before we check if it's a tricycle aircraft, we should always check the weight of the engine so that it won't not it should be balanced. And while removing and we can also deflate landing gear shocks, because if we would do that, this would prevent us from preventing the extending of the engine weight while we are removing something on the aircraft. Place all cowling that does not need repairs on rock where it can be readily found when the time comes to reinstall it on the new engine. After removing the cowling, the propeller should be removed from inspection or repair. These two paragraph shows us that we should put those things that we use in place so that we would not be in Tagalog it's termed malito on those things, so that we should be in order, and we should also remove the propeller while we're doing some inspection on or repair on the aircraft. Next topic is draining the engine. Place a large metal pan, drip pan on the floor under the engine to catch any spilled mixture or oil. Next, secure a clean container in which to drain the oil or corrosive preventive mixture. This shows us like on the change oil of a motorcycle. We are putting looks like somehow a pan, sanlaan in Tagalog, so that we would not spill any containment of oil on the ground, because you know it's a hard time to clean those oil. And we should also check on the aircraft that we should use a clean container so that we could somehow avoid any corrosion. Next is place the container beneath the engine, open the drain valve, and allow the oil to drain. The next thing is you should open the drain valve and allow the oil to drain, which means here in figure 8 to 4, this is how it is being demonstrated. Next thing is other points at which the oil system is drained. Categorically include the oil cooler, oil return line, and engine socks. All valves, drains, and line must remain open until the oil system was completely drained. While draining the oil, we should check first that all valves and lines are open so that all oil are completely drained. So that you know that, so that there would not be any oil remained on the system. After draining the oil, reinstall all drain plugs and close all drain valves. Then wipe all excess oil from around the drain points. After draining, we should assemble it back, and after that we will gonna wipe the edge of the what's this called, from the drain valves. We should wipe it so that the oil would not spill out. Next is the electrical disconnects. Electrical disconnections are usually made at the engine firewall. Also, do not leave long electrical cables or conduits hanging loose, since they may become entangled with some parts of the aircraft while the engine is being hosted. On these two paragraphs, it shows us that it's not mandatory to leave any cables, because there will be entanglement, like in Tagalog it's called buhol-buhol, on the aircraft. And next is, it is good practice to coil all lengths of cable and flexible conduit neatly and tie or tape them to some portion of the assembly being removed. Wrap moisture-proof tape over the exposed ends of connectors to protect them from dirt and mixtures. On the third paragraph, this shows us that we are obligated to tie or tape so that we need the tie and the tape while the assembly is being removed. Then the next is we should wrap tape over the exposed ends of connectors. The reason is we are preventing any dirt or any mixture that would go inside our oil system. The next topic is disconnection of engine controls. The engine control rods and cables connect such units as the carburetor, fuel control, throttle valve, and mixture control valve with their manually conduit control in the cockpit. The controls are sometimes disconnected by removing the turnbuckle that joins the end. Here in the report visual aids, here are some example of it. Then the rod end assemblies determine the length of the control rod by the distance they are screwed on it, and they are locked into position by check nuts. We can see that we can check the rod end assemblies if they are locked by using a check nuts. After the engine control leakage have been disconnected, the nuts and bolts should be replaced in the rod ends or bell cranks to prevent their being lost. In this paragraph, this shows us the connections of both nuts and bolts are replaced because the reason is this would prevent it from being lost. All control rods should be removed completely or tied back. After, it's like mandatory, like if you will assemble it, you should, after you disassemble it, you're gonna intend to assemble it. Disconnection of lines. The lines units within the aircraft and the engines are either flexible hose or aluminum alloy tubes joined by links or hose clamped to them. This explains that the lines here in the picture are connected by either a flexible hose or an aluminum alloy. Lines that must withstand high pressure, such as hydraulic lines, are often made of stainless steel tubing. Those lines that are being used to withstand a high pressure are made up of stainless steel tubing because stainless steel tubing is somehow a strong steel, and it would withstand high pressures. Most lines leading from QECA are secured to a threaded fitting at the firewall by a slip knot around the tubing. Some types of containers should be used to collect any fuel or other fluid that may drain from disconnected lines. Some of the containers are used to collect a fuel, oil, or other fluid. After the lines have drained, they should They should be immediately plugged or covered with moisture-proof tape to prevent foreign matter from entering them, as well as to prevent accumulated fluid from dripping out. As what we have said earlier, after we drain, we are intended to put a cover on it to prevent moisture or any foreign matter, because it's too small, we cannot see it with our naked eyes. Removing the engine. If QECA is being removed, the engine mount accompanies the engine. The mount remains on the aircraft if only the engine is being removed. This means that while the QECA is removed, the engine mount is like accompanied by the engine. The engine is being stayed on the mount while it is being removed. Before the engine can be freed from its attachment points, a sling must be installed so that the engine's weight can be supported with a hoist when the mounting bolts are removed. A sling is needed on the engine's weight because it supports it while we do a hoisting and while the bolts are being removed. Engines or QECAs have marked points for attaching a hoisting sling. The location of these attaching points varies according to the size and weight of distribution of the engine. We have different markings on the aircraft engines, and these markings determine the size and weight of the engine. Next is a matter of safety. Carefully inspect the sling condition before installing it on the engine. Before attaching the sling to the hoist, be sure that the hoist has sufficient capacity to lift the engine safely. The engine center of gravity, CG, should always be taken into account as the engine is hoisted. It's like on the weight and balance. You cannot it would be a hard time carrying a heavy object. If it's too heavy, it would really be a hard time. And it's written here that the hoist has sufficient capacity to lift the engine safely. Because if it too heavy, it may damage the engine. That's why we need a sufficient capacity. The next is this hoist assembly is specifically be removing engines and other manufacturer for the purpose. Gonna fix this first. The assembly is physically being removed, removing engines and other assemblies for aircraft manufactured for the purpose of some frames are fitted with the power operated hoist. This should be used with care. Some frames are fitted with power operated hoist. This should be Used with care, since considerable damage can be done if inexperienced operator allows a power operator hoist to overrun. It's like being a mechanic. You need to be experienced to handle a different and difficult job. And the hoist and frames should be checked for condition before being used to lift the engine. We should always check the hoist and frame, because if it is damaged, or let's say it would have a corrosion, it may possibly damage the frame and the hoist, and it would also damage the engine. It's like, triple kill in gamers term. The next is hoisting the engine. Before the hoist is hooked into the engine sling, let's check the aircraft tail supports and the wheel chocks. If the before the hook is hooked on the engine sling, we are required to check if the aircraft tail supports and the wheel chocks. We are obliged to check all of those. Next is fasten lines to engine at points on the sides or rear, so that the engines can be controlled as it is being hosted. Fasten lines, because if it is not fastened enough, it might damage the engine while being hoisted. And it may be it may make the job easy to control it while being hoisted. Hook the hoist onto the sling and hoist the engine just enough to relieve the engine's weight from the mount attachment. We should hook it on the right place, and this would just give us a nice room. So that we can carry the engine easily. Remove the nuts from the mount attachments in the order recommended in the manufacturer's instruction for the aircraft. We should remove the nuts on the mount attachments, and we are obliged to always check on the manufacturer's manual instructions or manual, so that if we don't know what we are doing, or if it's our first time doing it, we are still needed to read those manual. If bolts must be removed from the mount attachments, be sure that the engine is under control before doing so. This means if the bolts are being removed, with the engine, it's like the hoisting. If we are hoisting the engine, we should be sure that it's not moving, so that it might be easy job for the mechanics to remove those mounting attachment. If the bolts are to remain in the mount attachments, the hoist can be gently maneuvered upward or downward as necessary after all the nuts have been removed. Those bolts are needed to remain on those mount attachments, and the hoist can be gently maneuvered upward or downward. This means that we can easily move the hoist up and down while the nuts are being removed. When the hoist has removed all the engine's weight from the mount attachments, the engine should be eased gently forward away from the aircraft. When it is being after hoisting, the engine should gently move forward, and away from the aircraft so that it may not damage the aircraft. When the engine has been removed, it can be carefully lowered onto the stand. The engine should be fastened to the stand and prepared for the removal of accessories. While the engine is being removed, the next step is we should put it on the stand, and the stand should be sturdy enough and it might not fall. And after that, we're gonna remove all of the accessories of it. The procedure just discussed applies to the removal of most reciprocating and turbine aircraft engines. Any variation in details is outlined in the manufacturer's instructions. Before attempting any engine removal, always consult these instructions for the aircraft concerned. As what we've said here, it's what it said here on the fourth paragraph. We are recommended in the manufacturer's instruction for the aircraft. Like if we connect it on the second paragraph here, we should always consult on the instructions of the manufacturer's manual. And because if we would not consult it, we might have a hard time fixing the aircraft, because if it's like a computer, the problems and the solutions are on Google, while on the aircraft it's all on the manufacturer's manual, and all of the answers or solutions of the problem on the aircraft are already written on it. Hoisting and mounting the engine for installation. The new or overhauled engine is ready to be hoisted for installation. Move the engine stand as close as possible to the nozzle in which the replacement is to be installed. The engine stand may be moved at the hoist frame position so that the engine can be hoisted easily into the nozzle. While hosting, we should put the engine stand on the position on the engine so that it may be easier for it to be hoisted on the aircraft nozzles. To prevent injury to the crew or damage to the aircraft or engine, be sure that the engine is steadied when moving the hoist frame. It's like let's be sure that the engine is not moving, because it may cause injury to the aircraft mechanic or the crew of the aircraft. Engine nozzles are rarely designed for the engine to be fitted and bolted into the place as though it were being mounted on the bare wall. The engine must be guided into the position and mated with its various connections such as mounting bolts, holes, and exhaust tailpipe. There are rare cases that the engine nozzles are designed on the engines that are being connected connected and fitted on the bolted. It's like being mounted on the bare wall. When the engine has been aligned correctly in the nozzle, insert the mounting bolts into their holes and start all of the nuts on them. Always use the type of bolt and nuts recommended by the manufacturer. Never use an unauthorized substitution of a different type or specification of nuts and bolts than that prescribed. Just like we've tackled earlier, that the all that we need are on the manufacturer's manual, and we are not intended to use any alternatives and use a different kind of engines, bolts or nuts that are not suitable on the specification on that aircraft. The applicable manufacturer's instructions outline the sequence for tightening the mounting bolts to ensure security of fastening. It's like on what we've said earlier. It's written on the manufacturer's manual on how to to tighten and mount the bolts, and we are doing it for safety purposes. Mounting the engine into the nozzle is, of course, only the beginning. All of the ducts, electrical leads, control tubes, and conduits must be connected before the engine can be operated. It's like on the computer. It's like an example only that you should put the GPU, the power supply, the CPU, the holder before turning the computer on. It's like also here on the aircraft. Always check the ducts, electrical leads, control tubes, and conduits are connected on it before being on. Connections and adjustments. There are no hard and fast rules that are direct the order in which units or systems should be connected to the engine. Each maintenance organization normally supplies a worksheet or checklist to be followed during these procedures. Worksheets are needed or checklist because it's like it would help us what are the first step that we are gonna check, second thing that we are gonna check, third thing, so on and so forth. The list is based upon past engines installations on each particular aircraft. If this is followed carefully, it serves as a guide for an efficient installations. If we're gonna follow the checklist or the worksheet, we would have a efficient installation. And that's all. End of the report.